Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.
All right, welcome back to Bible Answers. I am your host, Dr. Al Garza. So I was sent this video clip of Dr. James White talking about soteriology in relations to Romans 9, regarding to what another individual has interpreted to be, that I guess Dr. White did not agree with, which, being a Reformed Calvinist that he is, if it has anything to do with the opposite of Calvinism, soteriology, then of course he would not agree with it. But some things I want to address that were dealt with by Dr. White that it seems to, not cross his mind as to what the text is saying versus what he thinks it's saying, and then going into talking about John 6. Now, I won't be talking about John 6. I actually wrote a book on this called Calvinism Challenge, which I've got great reviews on, challenging even some Calvinists that have emailed me saying how it challenged them. And I deal with John 6 and the Romans 9 and other passages in this book as well. But what I want to be talking about today deals with how Dr. White is dealing with Romans 9 with another individual. So I want to play this clip, and I want you to listen to what Dr. White says, and then I'm going to challenge him and other reformers on this particular interpretation that he thinks that this is the only way you can interpret Romans 9, regardless of what anyone says. Unfortunately, that's not the case, specifically from a first century Jewish perspective, coming from the Second Temple period, how the Jews would have understood what Paul was saying, since Paul was a rabbinical Pharisee from the house of Gamliel. So actually from the house of Hillel, trained by Gamliel. So this is what's interesting, because Dr. White is going to pose one position as if there's no other interpretation possible, and I'm going to point to a passage in Romans 9 that contradicts what he just says. And I'm saying this flat out with no disrespect to Dr. White. I think outside of his soteriological views, he's a phenomenal scholar in the other areas. But in this particular case, myself and other believers and Jewish believers would never agree with this type of view in soteriology of the scriptures that would date back to the time of Paul and the apostles. So let me play this clip and I'll comment.
Dr. Gagnon wrote, "It may sound in 9:1-29 like everything is predetermined, giving no option for human beings to resist or respond. Yet even the potter-clay imagery echoes the potter story in Jeremiah 18, in which God emphasizes that the fate of nations is determined by their response to God. And if they change that response, God will change the good or evil he planned for them. So God has plans, but these plans interact with human will." And as I read stuff like this, where instead of going into Romans 9, where it specifically says, not human will, it says it as strongly and as repetitively as possible. This is how Norman Geisler would approached it. Well, we can't get focused on just Romans 9. Think about the potter and the clay, and let's go over to Jeremiah 18. But that wasn't what Paul applied. He didn't apply it to nations. He didn't do the Jeremiah 18 thing. He did, God prepares vessels unto destruction, and God prepares vessels of mercy. That was his application.
So the question is, was it Paul's application? Now, what Dr. White fails to start from, again, going back to the fact that when Paul wrote these letters, there was no chapter and verses. But if we have to start somewhere, I would suggest starting in chapter 7, verse 1, where Paul says, "I'm speaking to you, to those who know the Torah." Now, that's key, because he's addressing in 7, 8, 9, 10, even to 11, those who are familiar, who know the Torah, specifically Jews and even Hellenistic Jews, about what he's about to talk about. And this goes into chapter 9. Of course, what he's saying is don't apply Jeremiah 18 to this passage. In other words, just read what it says, interpret it this way, the way he wants you to interpret it, but ignore it, Jeremiah, where it's coming from, as if those who understand the Torah won't know what Paul's saying. When Paul mentions these verses with Pharaoh, which Dr. White says the human will, well, that passage is preceding the Jeremiah quote, talking about Pharaoh and mercy, and who God have mercies and not have mercy, referring to how God used Pharaoh to show his power. This, again, has nothing to do with eternal life and the election and so forth. This is speaking how God, his hand is on his creation, and he will use those things with the foreknowledge that he has. He will use nations to demonstrate his power and glory, whether they're the nations who are against him or for him. In this place of Jeremiah, this was the nation of Israel. And I'm going to prove that from the text, because actually Dr. White is not being completely honest with the context. There is a historical context, and he's wrong. When Paul says, I'm speaking to you who know the Torah, and then he quotes the Torah, he's keeping in mind that the Jews will understand what he's saying when he starts quoting passages about Pharaoh and Moses and Jeremiah and Abraham. And they're going to understand what he's saying because they read the Torah. These are the Hebrew Jews and the Greek Jews. So he doesn't have to, he's not reinterpreting it. There's nothing in the chapter about eternal life. This is how God chooses a people for himself as a nation. And then when they disobey them, he uses them for different things, whether it's for himself for glory or not his glory. Now, Dr. White said it's not talking about nations, it's not referring to nations. Well, I disagree. In fact, if you keep reading after Paul references back to Jeremiah 18, he actually tells you who he is addressing. Is it individuals or is it the nations? Referring back to Jeremiah. Well, let's read, because this is where it gets interesting. After he discusses and talks about the potter and the clay and so forth, he says, basically, what if God, although willing to demonstrate his wrath and to make his power known, endures with much patience vessels of wrath prepared for destruction, and to make known the riches of his glory upon vessels of mercy, which is prepared beforehand for glory, of whom he also called not from among Judea, or the word Jews, that's where we get the word Jews from Judah, or Judea, from Judah, not from among Judah, or the Jews only, but also from among the nations, the Gentiles, which is a word for the nations, as he says also in Hosea. And he quotes Hosea, which again talks about a people for himself, and that is the nation of Israel and Judah, because he talks about Isaiah cries out concerning Israel. Now, last time I checked, Israel is the nation. And he quotes, again, Isaiah of Israel as a nation. What shall we say then, verse 30? That the nations, or the Gentiles who do not pursue righteousness, attained righteousness, even the righteous which is by faith. But Israel, pursuing a law of righteousness, did not arrive at Torah. So, according to Paul, he's referring to the nations, the Gentiles who are of the nations, and the Jews, or Judah, where we get the word. The word Jew comes from the word Yehuda, Judah. So if you're from the tribe of Judah, you are a Jew. So he's talking about, and then he goes into Israel, quoting Isaiah. Again, Isaiah, Hosea, referring to the nations. That's how we know that the preceding verses are talking about Israel, and Jeremiah 18 as, again, reaffirming what's about to come upon Israel as a nation and Judah for what they've done. They've turned their back on God, and God gave them many chances of repentance. And in Jeremiah, because they formed themselves and spoiled themselves, God had to reform them. Exile, bring back. But this is key, because he tries to say that it's not about the nations. But yet Paul talks about Judah, Israel, and the nations, which is referred to as Gentiles in translation. And I'm sorry, but the chapter 9 specifically mentions Israel, Judah, the nations. Just because your translation might say Gentiles, it's still the word for nations, or Jews, which is for Judah, and of course Israel. And he quotes it right below. So I'm not sure why Dr. White misses that. And again, if you start from Romans 7, who he's speaking to in the audience, Romans 8, again, to the Torah, to the Jews, to the Torah, speaking specifically, in the 9, talking about the covenants and the people of Israel and the brethren. He goes into how the nation is formed from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and down the line, Moses and Pharaoh, how God uses that, into the vessels of wrath, the potter's clay, how when they spoil themselves, as looking at Jeremiah, which Dr. White obviously knows that's the context of Jeremiah 18, but he won't apply it here, because if he does, his whole view collapses. So he has to tell you to read the Bible backwards. Let's read Romans 9 first and interpret it as this way, as if Paul is meaning this, and forget the fact that Paul is quoting a passage that the Jews would have understood of what he's saying, by quoting Jeremiah 18 as if this is a whole new interpretation, a whole new view. It is completely ridiculous. These ideas are foreign to the Jews of the first century as the Calvinistic soteriological view. It doesn't exist. Not in that way. So if you want to hold to a Calvinistic view, go right ahead. But don't try and force it into the mouth of Paul, who is a rabbinic Pharisee from the house of Hillel, trained under Gamliel, at his feet of Gamliel, who would have never had these views of soteriological views of Calvinism. Foreign to the text. So I got to strongly point this out. This was sent to me to comment, and I was shocked to hear how Dr. White likes to read the Bible backwards and ignore the historical context of when Paul quotes something. We should ignore where it came from and just interpret it as the way Dr. White wants you to interpret it, period. That's it, as a Calvinistic lens, and forget where it came from and what the context was. It's frustrating. Because I know Dr. White is a great scholar in other areas of the Trinity and Islam and other areas. But when it comes to this type of interpretation and reading the scriptures in its historical context and looking at who's writing it and all the background behind it, he completely throws everything else out the window. All the basic principles of interpretation, specifically of that time frame. And I've asked, like I said, I've spoken to many Jews, believing Jews and unbelieving Jews about some of these passages and what they think. And they don't see how... they don't see it at all the way a Calvinist sees it, period. They look at it the way I'm telling you. When it refers to the Old Testament, you go back to see what's being quoted in its context and how it's being applied to see what's being meant here. Not redefine it and they throw it out. And as James White says, you can't go back how Paul's... unbelievable. If that principle we apply to everything in the New Testament, then we could just throw the Old Testament out, because every time Paul quotes the Old Testament, Matthew quotes it, Mark, Luke, and John, we can say, well, they're quoting something different. Let's reinterpret it. Forget what they're quoting. Forget how they're using it. Let's just reinterpret it to what we want it to say. We can rewrite the whole New Testament with whole new theology if we throw out the Old Testament of where they're getting their quotations from with that type of logic. It doesn't fit. And I hope Dr. White sees that, or Calvinists see that, any Calvinist reform, because it's a terrible way to approach the scriptures. It really is. But I was sent this email. I had to make a comment about it. I got a lot of responses about what I think about it. So I hope this helps. I know a lot of people will disagree who are Calvinists and Reformed, but oh well. Like I said, I'm not here to please them. I'm here to speak the truth in the scriptures in its context as a whole. The Hebrew New Testament manuscripts that now attest to the New Testament. We have about 4,000 of them, and you will not find that type of Calvinistic view of soteriology in any of these manuscripts. So that's just another witness to the fact that the language of Yeshua, being Hebrew, his mother tongue, would fit perfectly with the Second Temple first century period of Jews, specifically in a Pharisaical mind of the views of God, soteriology, and so forth, not a Calvinistic one. So I hope this helps. I want to thank you for tuning in, subscribing. Please like and share, subscribe. If you have any questions, leave them here. You can go to my website, drlgarza.org, to see some of my other projects, my books, what I'm doing with the Hebrew New Testament manuscripts. But if you have any questions, email me or leave them here, and I'll be glad to respond. I try to respond to everybody. Whether you agree or disagree, I will respond. I believe in communication. I don't believe in not responding, as some scholars do. They won't respond to anybody. I will respond and have a discussion. So again, I want to thank you for listening and tuning in. And this is the Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza. God bless and have a wonderful day.
Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.